there, everyone. My name is Miranda, and I will be walking you through today's presentation. As a way of personal introduction, I am a junior pursuing dual degrees in psychology and sociology, and my areas of interest involve the psychopathology of deviance and the psychological processes that are behind criminal intent. I know it sounds pretty cool, doesn't it? So let's just go ahead and jump right in. Did you know that the domestication of animals began after the last ice age? But it wasn't until the 19th century that animal rights actually became a worthwhile consideration. Which, I mean, that's pretty cool, right? Animal rights is the first step in the reduction of an anthropomorphic thought. And I mean, if you take a look at our legislative processes that are in place to protect non-human species, you would think, this is pretty great. However, this legislation is consistently created in such a way as to protect human interests rather than the interests of the non-human species itself. For example, fishing laws were created to regulate harm and ensure the longevity of the species for human use rather than protecting the rights of the non-human species itself. These laws were originally created to protect business interests of animal owners. Farm animals were viewed as property, therefore if an action were to cause the damage of or the death to a non-human species, financial compensation was to be given to the owner. Rather than ensuring that each earthling was granted a life free of pain and suffering, harm is regulated by the humans and in the best interest of the humans. I think the real question we should be asking ourselves is how can a society allow the consistent and systematic abuse of living creatures? And to answer this question, we are going to jump right into the psychological processes of human beings. So let's go ahead and get started. There are three categories that we are going to take a look at. First, we're going to look at domestic abuse, or abuse occurring in the home. Secondly, we are going to take a look at social abuse, or abuse occurring in a group context. And finally, we are going to take a look at systematic abuse, or abuse occurring on a larger scale. We are going to break these down in regards to psychological risk factors and processes associated with each category. To begin, let's look at domestic abuse through a couple of case studies. Feel free to answer my questions at home. We're going to start by introducing you to Jackson. Jackson is an 8-year-old male living with his mother, father, and their kitten Paco. Jackson's father hit his mother for the first time when Jackson was 6, and ever since he has witnessed the physical altercations between his parents. Often Jackson's mother will hit him after a fight with his father. Do you think that it is likely that Jackson will abuse Paco? If you guess yes, then you would be correct. Congratulations. Studies have shown that there is a high correlation between displaced aggression and the subsequent abuse of non-human species. And displaced aggression is defined as the tendency for those who have been victimized to feel the need to exert power over weaker beings. This is often the reason why abused children will abuse their pets. They feel victimized and as a defense mechanism release their pent-up emotion on weaker beings as a way to exert control. Secondly, I would like to introduce you to Josh and his dog G. Josh is a 15-year-old male living at home with his mother, father, sister, and his dog G. Josh is quiet, plays on the basketball team, and volunteers at the soup kitchens on the weekends. He wants to be a high school teacher when he grows up and wants to specialize in teaching special needs children. But Josh is often bullied at school because he's not like the other kids. However, he has never retaliated, nor has he ever shown the intent to retaliate. Do you think that Josh demonstrates the psychopathology of someone who may abuse an animal? If you answered no, then you would be correct. By volunteering at the soup kitchen, Josh shows that he has high levels of empathy, and individuals who are susceptible to harming non-human species are often very low in empathy. And although bullying is highly correlated with animal abuse, by refusing to retaliate, Josh shows that he is high in emotional regulation and high in internalizing processes. Individuals who are susceptible to harming non-human species are often low in emotional regulation and high in externalizing processes. Finally, I would like to introduce you to Angela. Angela is a 27-year-old female. She lives alone with her dog Carly. Angela has recently been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, which makes it difficult for her to maintain interpersonal relationships. She came home today after a rough day and expected Carly to meet her excitedly at the door when she walked in. However, Carly was asleep and did not react. What will Angela do? Will Angela retaliate against Carly or just wake her up to go outside? If you guessed that she would retaliate against Carly, you would be correct. Individuals struggling with borderline personality disorder are often high in antisocial tendencies and rejection sensitivity, both of which are risk factors for violence against non-human species. Rejection sensitivity is the tendency for an individual to interpret ambiguous stimuli as inherently negative, eliciting a violence and vengeful response. And since the behaviors of non-human species are often more ambiguous than those of humans, you can see why this might lead to an increase in abuse. Now we're going to jump right into social abuse. Why do individuals engage in harming animals on a group setting? Well, let me tell you about Bandura and his social learning theory. Bandura went out and got a bunch of children from the broader population and separated them into two groups. The children in the first group sat down and watched a video of an experimenter being very nice to a doll. The children in the second group sat down and watched a video of an experimenter being very mean to a doll. After the videos, the children were taken out of the room individually and placed in separate rooms alone with dolls and asked to play with the dolls. Those in the first condition who saw the experimenter play nicely with their doll played nicely with their dolls, and those in the second condition who saw the experimenter be mean to their doll were aggressive and domineering towards their dolls. Bandura used his results to develop the theory of social learning, which indicates that individuals learn how to react with their environment through the imitation of observed behaviors. The same can be said for individuals endorsing violence against non-human species. As an example, let's bring back Josh and G. Ever since he was little, Josh and his family have gone with some friends on the weekends to watch cockfighting. This was the only real social interaction he saw his parents engage in while growing up. Would this increase or decrease his likelihood of engaging in the abuse of non-human animals? If you guessed that it would increase his likelihood, then you would be correct. Bandura would say that since Josh has grown up in an environment where intimidation and violence were highly associated with social interaction, then he would model this behavior into his adulthood. He would seek out blood sports such as cockfighting, dogfighting, or hunting in order to make social connections with other individuals. This would endorse the continuation of violence against non-human species on a group level. Finally, we are going to take a look at systematic abuse. Why is there systematic abuse against living creatures? And the answer lies in the societal construction of a victim status. This actually can be seen all the way back to the 17th century, where in instances of bestiality, or the sexual intercourse between human beings and non-human beings, both the human and the non-human species were put to death. Rather than being seen as victims of a sexual assault, the non-human being was often viewed as the offender in their own victimization. So let's take a look at one more case file. This is Darcy. Darcy is a pit bull that belongs to a loving family. She was out playing in her backyard when a stranger approached, and to protect her family, Darcy attacked the stranger. The stranger was then rushed to the emergency room with severe wounds. However, it turns out that the stranger was a family member that Darcy did not know, and the hospital subsequently reports the attack to the authorities. Tell me, what happens to Darcy? If you guessed that Darcy would be okay, you were wrong. Darcy was taken to the pound and euthanized for her efforts. You may ask, but why? Well, this is what happens when you are a member of a bad species. Regardless of the circumstances, these species will be persecuted as the offender and have numerous people tell them that they have to eliminate this dangerous species. This categorization results in their systematic abuse, which leads to their permanent victimization within society. However, they will not be treated as a victim because of their membership to this bad species. You're probably wondering, how do you categorize living creatures? Well, animals are often placed in human categories on the basis of their assigned status within the dominant human culture. And this often stems from the application of speciesism. And these categories are created on the basis of human needs, wants, and the potential for monetary gain. And they often end with the systematic abuse of entire species. Let's take a look at a few examples and the result of such a categorization. Wild animals who are viewed as pets are often species such as mice, blackbirds, and kangaroos. These animals are often devoid of value due to their categorization within society and undergo mass abuse and extermination. Domestic economic animals used as food are typically farm animals such as cows, pigs, and chickens. And these animals often undergo significant abuse, such as the debeaking of chicken without anesthesia, animals meant for veal being tied up with no sun, food, or water, and the forced impregnation of dairy cows for the production of milk. Economic animals meant for entertainment, such as elephants, zebras, and lions, are systematically abused through zoos, circuses, and the private collection of exotic animals for status. However, the literature has done very little to connect these three aspects of abuse to one another. However, to sustain a society that supports the systematic abuse of non-human species, it requires a certain level of connection that extends beyond societal trends and into the field of human psychopathology. And the culmination of the literature suggests that the experiences in childhood impact the actions of adolescence and end with the complicity of adulthood. Meaning that as domestic violence increases, or violence in our society in general, there is an increase in events that may trigger biological dispositions to things such as being high in aggression, high in externalizing, high in antisocial tendencies, and low in empathy, all of which are risk factors for the abuse of non-human species. And this routinized violence would also increase the modeling of violent tendencies at a young age, as seen in social learning theory, leading to a generation that enjoys and endorses societal violence, such as blood sports. This would all result in a cohort of parents, politicians, and activists who are knowingly complicit in the systematic abuse of non-human animals. In a word, I believe that the routinized violence in our society will increase the abuse of non-human animals beginning on the individual level. Now let's go ahead and end with a brief review. Beginning with domestic violence, as we saw in the cases of Josh, Angela, and Jackson, individuals who engage in abuse of non-human animals are often high in externalizing processes, antisocial tendencies, and rejection sensitivity. They are also generally low in empathy, low in internalizing processes, and low in emotional regulation. And these non-human species are often victimized due to displaced aggression and mental disorders. Societal abuse is generally maintained by social learning theory, in that humans learn at a young age to associate violence and intimidation with blood sports to create a social atmosphere. Finally, as we saw in cases such as Darcy, the victimization on a systemic level is often a result of the implementation of human categorization of non-human creatures for human food, profit, and entertainment.